It may seem difficult to believe, but we're actually going to talk about ranged Lone Druids. Although ranged is perhaps not quite the right word, as you're going to see. But we're going to watch here a game of DaXak playing Lone Druids, and he is going to go for a druid-focused build. He's going to put all of his items on his main hero and leave the bear almost completely naked. But it's not going to be the old sniper druid. In fact, it's a more short-ranged, tankier and more brawly type of hero, so it doesn't actually matter that the 7.25 patch that just came out removed the range talent at level 10. Now you have the spirit bear movement speed talents. It doesn't matter to us, we don't want to take the range talent anyway. In this build, we just want the health talent actually at level 10. Before we get into the specifics of this game, let's briefly talk about the history of the range build. So in the old days, range build was a complete meme. You had a hero that was really fast, but you hit like a wet noodle, so it just was not a very strong build. But then came patch 7.00, and in this patch, talents were introduced. So the introduction of these talents slightly buffed the old Radiance Druid build. You got like a little bit of health here, you got some attack damage here, some armor, but these bonuses were pretty small. But you got huge bonuses for this range build. You had 200 attack range at level 10, that's insane. You had 65 attack damage, that's even more insane at level 15. And then you had minus 50-second respawn time. These were some insanely strong talents, and that just catapulted Lone Druid into the slot of probably the best carrier of that patch. But a lot of players, even the pros, were quite slow to figure out that this ranged build was really strong, so it took a while for it to get nerfed. So in 7.01 it didn't get any sort of nerf. Then in 7.02, when people were starting to figure out that this hero was really busted, he got some moderate nerfs, and then in 7.03 he was completely destroyed. And these nerfs not only made the range build quite weak, they also made the Radiance Druid build even worse. And from here, Lone Druid ended a very dark time where it was just complete garbage tier. You got a couple of buffs, and by the time we get here to 7.06c, Lone Druid was in like a kind of okay state. He still wasn't particularly good, but you could play the old Radiance build, you could play the range build, but neither of them was particularly strong. Then along came 7.07, changing a whole bunch of things and dealing a death blow to the range build by removing this damage talent. And from then on, range build was very marginal. Until 7.20 rolled around, this patch gave us the defender ability, and it replaced Rabbit with a new Spirit Link ability, which at this point was still inactive. And in this patch, Lone Druid was buffed through the roof, making both the Radiance Druid build and the range build much stronger. But it turned out actually the range build was the stronger of the two. This was also in combination with the much buffed Wraith Bands. The Wraith Band stacking was a very strong thing in this patch. So this made the ranged Druid the way to go. But then the range build got a couple of nerfs, Wraith Bands were nerfed, and the hero sort of fell back into obscurity. And then patch 7.23 came along, and this was a huge buff to the bear, and now people once again played the melee form. They figured out that just stacking single target DPS items on the bear is now the way to go. So you just now go for this Phase Boots, Mask of Madness, Desolator, Basher, AC, or variations thereof. This gives you a very fast, high tempo build, and it was really, really strong. But then we had a couple of nerfs. Right now, this way of playing Lone Druid is still very strong, but maybe the range build has been overlooked, because these changes are also great for our ranged druids. So this new ultimate actually is a lot stronger for this range build than the old one was, because you can now actually fight in true form because you no longer lose movement speed. And it makes you incredibly tanky, and you lose some range, but other than that it's much stronger. So this is why the range build might actually be viable once more. So right at the start of this game, we see that Daxak has gone for a very unusual starting item build. He in fact hasn't bought any items except for the Scrolling Blade. Didn't even buy a TP scroll and a spare, which I think is actually a mistake. I think you should at least buy this TP scroll. But the reason he can get away with this insane starting item build is because he's playing against a Daxak. And Daxak is just a very weak laner, and he's in particular really weak against Lone Druid. So you just don't really need Region. He can't really harass you at the start, and you just don't need these kind of starting items. You can get away with not buying them. And what he's going to do here is he's going to go for a very fast Maelstrom. So this was played in the last patch, where this Javelin was quite a bit stronger than it is now. The damage was reduced from 100 to 80 in the 725 patch that just came out. But back when this game was played, like 2 or 3 days ago, it was still 100 damage, and this made Javelin one of actually the most efficient DPS items in the game. And of course, combined with Mithril Hammer, you get Maelstrom, which is a really strong farming item. And he's playing here against this Daxak, can't really contest him in lane. So there's really no reason to buy these efficient status in the start. You just want items that make you farm fast. And so that's what he's going for. That said, I would have liked him to at least go for an Uber or Blightstone here. This bear is a bit naked here with just the Quelling Blade. But as it is, he's going to go straight for this big item, which in almost all situations is a horrible thing to do here. But here in this specific matchup against this Daxak, it might be the correct thing to do. And if you go for this range build, you don't necessarily have to go for Maelstrom into Mjolnir, but here in this game he's playing with a lot of space creating heroes on his team. Like Void Spirit is the quintessential space creating mid. Nature's Prophet also quite the good space creator. So here you can actually go for this like hard carry type of build, where you want to go for this farming item in the Maelstrom and the Mjolnir. And then of course you're also playing against a Phantom Lancer, where of course having a Mjolnir is very strong. And as you can see, even without any of these efficient early game items, he's been able to dominate this lane. Lone Druid is just so strong against Daxak, because Daxak doesn't really threaten you. You can always tank those creeps with your bear. And here in this situation, he kind of wishes that he had a TP to send his bear home. So he's just gonna, actually he wanted to just go to the fountain here, but then he sees he actually needs his bear to help with the last sitting and tanking this creeper that's coming in. So he actually has to keep the bear around here, even though it's quite low. Because the enemy lane is so much weaker, they have to resort to things like this, trying to go for this jungle camp, and this gets quickly punished. Of course, if you know that the enemy heroes has a lot of AoE damage, you know that they might try to do something like this. So always something you have to keep in mind and punish that if the enemy tries to go for a cheeky play like this. The runes are coming up, so of course you send the bear to try to get the runes. This is especially of course important if you go for this range build, because you're not going to miss your bear as much. But even if you go for the regular bear build, you should still be doing this. And the bear, as long as you have 7 draw up, the bear is actually really good at getting those runes. Right now Daxak is using his bear as like a semi-courier. He's flying out these items to the bear, and now he's picked up this Mithril Hammer and also finally now a Town Portal Scroll. He should have gotten that from the start, but at least now he has one. Better late than never. And now he's finished this Maelstrom, and you see it's less than 6 minutes. This is an extremely early Maelstrom, of course, which is going to catapult Daxak's farm into the stratosphere. let's talk a little bit about skill builds. We see here he has only put a single point into the bear and 3 points into the spirit link. And this is him just being ultra greedy. DaXak has played a couple of more games of ranged Lone Druids, and if he has a harder lane matchup where he actually has to fight more, he usually gets something like 2 to 1 by the point he's level 5, and then he usually maxes the bear, because if you actually have to fight against the enemy, having extra levels into your entangling glass is actually quite important, as well as of course the extra HP you get on the spirit bear. But in this very passive, easy farming lane, you can just go for the greedier option of the spirit link, which gives you of course more sustain and also just more DPS. At this stage of the game, you just want to farm as much as possible. You want to shove in this lane with the Maelstrom and then do this jungle camp. Since Daxak is creep skipping, Lone Druid is actually going to come here. He has boots and he has his Maelstrom now, and he's going to take the wave here with a spirit bear. This way he doesn't lose any CS while he's hunting for this Daxak. And he also now has got a Gloves of Haste. It's going to give him extra DPS. He's going to find this Daxak, and Daxak is going to try to TP out, but of course Savage Roar is there, and even casts it on his bear because the bear's mana pool is more expendable. So he gets the kill here and preserves this creep wave, pulling it here with the bear, and now he's going to pull it into this hard camp, and then he's just going to farm this hard camp and this wave. Great farming efficiency. Always been a lookout for these kinds of plays if you have a very easy lane. Of course, if the enemy is there contesting you, pulling the wave into this creep camp is a bit risky, and oftentimes you're going to get a lot of stuff denied if you do this. DaXak is just minding his own business in the safe lane here as a smoke gang comes in. They're going in my S3, and there's no real way of playing yourself out of this situation, so he's just going to fall here. Actually should have been attacking with his bear to elite a little bit of HP and maybe survive for a second longer here, but either way there was no way of playing out of this situation. If you watched my other video on DaXak, you're going to be familiar with this item build, at least these gloves. In that game DaXak was playing Naga and going for Gloves of Haste instead of the traditional Wraith bands. And in that video I ended up concluding that this build is probably not what you want to go for in most situations, because in most situations probably the Wraith bands are slightly stronger just because they're better at fighting, even though they're like slightly worse at farming compared to Gloves of Haste. But here with this Lone Druid, you're actually naturally quite tanky, just because you have this level 10 talent with a 250 health, you have this ultimate that makes you ultra tanky, so you're not really that concerned with the strength that Wraith bands provide, and the int that they provide is also not very relevant because you just don't need that much mana on Lone Druid. So I actually think it makes a lot of sense here to go for these Gloves of Haste instead of Wraith bands. And of course this damage that Maelstrom puts out, as well as Mjolnir, the lightning damage, scales with your attack speed, so attack speed items are really efficient here, and they're going to help out at both farming and dealing with this Phantom Lancer. And here you can see Bullock's entire hero puddle pushing tier 1 tower, but as the enemy responds in force here, they back off a little bit, but they have 2 more heroes coming in. They're both smoked, so once these arrive they can re-engage and hopefully take down this tower. You can see him using his ultimate preemptively. You don't want to hold on too long to this ultimate because you just might get bursted otherwise. So they take down a lot of heroes, heroes go down, and now it's time to pressure this tier 2 tower, or at least force the fortification. So once the fortification is used, your creeper is going to die, and then you just have to back off. And especially if you go for this very greedy, very farm heavy build, you don't want to do too much early game fighting. Don't get me wrong, you can still fight, but you have to be a bit more careful, a bit more judicious in which fights are worth taking, which are not, because you are actually more of a farmer with this build than a fighter. DaXak's team find a Phantom Lancer and they manage to kill him quite easily, and with this kill it's now safe for DaXak to go hit this tower. All the rest of his team is nearby, So this is fairly safe. They're up 1 hero. So just hit this tower. They don't go too deep here. Just siege the tower. And that is a kill. Runes are coming up and no one is at the top runes. So DaXak is going to TP his spare here. He's going to try to pick up these runes. Use a Savage Roar. Gets the rune. Very nicely played here. And meanwhile, it's just farming with his main hero. So far, DaXak has gone for the ultimate grease here. But now that he wants to start fighting, he's getting Magic Wand, which is a really efficient item against Phantom Lancer, because it allows you to get your mana back once he's drained off it with his Diffu. And now the next item he's going to go for is a BKB. There's a lot of disable on the enemy team, a lot of magic damage, so getting BKB is very important for fighting. So he's gone for this Mjolnir and these Gloves of Haste for DPS and just farming ability. And now that he wants to start fighting, he goes for the BKB. Very efficient play. And they find this Phantom Lancer here thanks to Roar. They get the kill here. And now it's actually time to start pushing high ground. They actually have this Catapult, which they've kept alive. And currently we can see they have a 9k lead. They just won all 3 lanes. And they're just not letting up here. So that's also part of the reason why he goes for this early BKB, because they want to end early, because they have such a big advantage. Very strong ultimates being used here, but Roar is enough to save them. So I think they were actually standing a bit too close together there, but everyone gets away and the enemy used all their big ultimates. So it's a big win for them. One thing I'm wondering about is whether it isn't better to incorporate a Mask of Madness into this build. So Mask of Madness obviously is one of the standard items on the bear-focused build. And the reason Mask of Madness is very strong post 723 on the bear is that your Savage Roar now applies to both units. So just one of them has to cast it and then it gets casted around both of them. So if your bear is silenced from Mask of Madness, you can just cast Savage Roar on your main hero. But of course the same logic applies in reverse as well. If you have Mask of Madness on your main hero, you can always just cast Roar on your bear. So there's just not very many spells you need to cast reactively. It's just the Savage Roar. And then True Form, you can just cast it in advance. And the movement speed is also very useful if you're in True Form. Because if you're melee hero, it's very bad to get kited. So movement speed is incredibly important. And this is just a really cheap way of getting movement speed. And since you have so much armor anyway in your melee form, just the downsides of Mask of Madness are pretty insignificant. So I think it's actually an item you should incorporate into this build. Just like leave out maybe one of those Gloves of Haste and get the Mask of Madness instead. This entire game he hasn't gone for any items in the bag except for this Quelling Blade and some dusts here. You can use dust, try to get a kill here on the Sand King, but it's not enough. So honestly I think you should definitely at least get a Blightstone, just a really efficient DPS item, and since you have the slots on the Spirit Bear anyway, I think that would be a good addition here. Another fight breaks out. They're trying to go for this Phantom Lancer, and Phantom Lancer of course tries to go away here. Lone Druid gets focused, so he has to use his ultimate. Never be skimping with your ultimate. If at any point in the fight you get focused, always use your ultimate, and oftentimes you just use your ultimate preemptively. It's just makes you so much tankier, but it has quite a long transformation time. So once you're being stunned, once you're being focused, oftentimes you're not going to be able to actually get it off, so rather cast it early. And here in this fight, of course, you just go for whatever target is nearby, because you're not that fast actually, and you don't have range, so you just go for whatever target is near and just hit them with your right clicks. And of course using your Savage Roar judiciously, and just keeping the enemy from doing much, because of course this 12-second Savage Roar cooldown talent is really strong on this range build, even stronger than for the bear build. So the actual talent structure right now is really conducive actually to this range build. You get a really strong talent at level 10 and level 15, At level 20, the 40-second True Form cooldown is actually much stronger on this druid-focused build. And then, of course, level 25, you have to take the 1000 True Form health talent, which is sort of in a vacuum not as good as the Spirit Bear attack time talent, but it's still quite a good talent. And as Bulldog's hero puddle is doing Roshan, let's talk a little bit about when you should actually go for this build. So I've seen Daxak actually go for this build every time in the last couple of days when he played Lone Druid, which is only 4 games, it's not a lot, but still, apparently thinks this is a build that is at least worth experimenting with. But I don't think this is a build you want to go for every game, but there's just some games where this bear-focused build just isn't very strong. Like, for example, if you're playing as a hero like Phoenix, the bear is going to struggle a lot because the bear just doesn't do any damage to the egg, and it's just affected a lot worse by the attack speed reduction that Phoenix puts out than is the druid-focused build, which just has more attack speed in total. Then slow is also something that the bear has a hard time dealing with, because he's just this melee unit with no mobility abilities, and he easily gets kited when he gets slowed down. So you're playing as heroes like Chakiro, like Venomancer, especially if there's 2 or more of these kinds of heroes in the enemy team. Your bear just gets so bogged down that he can't really do much in fights. So in these kinds of games, maybe going for this range build is the better option. Another factor, of course, is Slada. Slada, one of the most meta offlaners in the current patch. And of course, Slada is quite strong against your bear because you can just put this minus armor on your bear and then your bear just melts away. Especially since you want to go for Mask of Madness on your bear and you want to go typically for the Savage Row cooldown talent. So your bear is going to be quite strapped for armor. So with this extra minus armor from the Slada, it's going to be quite difficult to keep your bear alive. Whereas your main hero, it's less of an issue because if you're in ranged form, you're kind of in the back lines, a bit more better protected. And if you're melee form, you get so much bonus armor that Slada is not too much of a problem. So there you have it, Daxak with another wacky build, possibly something that has been very much overlooked in the current meta. Write me down in the comment section if you think that Lone Druid ranged form is a viable build or something that at least is worth experimenting with. And as always, please, if you haven't done so, subscribe to this channel and ring the bell. And before we go, I'm going to leave you with another Daxak game that I mentioned earlier with this Naga build, as well as my full playlist of Lone Druid's guides for the recent patches. Of course, all focused on the standard bear builds. And always willing, I'll see you there.